Welcome back again. You're watching World Talks and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. European national security advisors arrived in Kyiv early on January 3rd to take part in a high-level meeting of the so-called Coalition of the Willing. The meetings come as Kyiv and its partners continue work on a draft peace plan aimed at ending Russia's war in Ukraine. All this took place as the world's attention turned to Venezuela, a development which might affect U.S. involvement in the peace efforts. To comment on the latest from the meetings and what's next, Dennis Kolesnyk, president of the MENA Research Center, joins me on World Talks. Hello and thank you for joining me on the program. It's a pleasure to have you back.
Hello.
So, as I said, the attention of the world seemed to head in a different direction today. From your perspective, what were some of the big takeaways of the meeting taking place in Kyiv today, and what's the significance?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that the discussion about the peace, the future peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine, albeit I remain actually quite skeptical that any results will be achieved soon enough. In my opinion, the peace is not yet possible between these two countries. At the same time, we have to prepare the framework, especially the security framework, because any future peace or let's say ceasefire deal is simply not possible if we do not provide Ukraine with tangible security guarantees, because Ukraine is not able to defend itself on its own against such an adversary as Russia. Therefore, the framework is being worked on by different Western and Central European leaders on the initiative, by the way, of the French President Emmanuel Macron, who launched the idea roughly 2 years ago. And today the discussions are going on about how would it be possible to actually propose to Ukraine a tangible security guarantees, possibly and most likely with the involvement of the foreign troops and boots on the ground in Ukraine. But at the same time, so today there is no consensus of how and what this forces could be, what the numbers and countries participating, and the application of those forces in Ukraine. So yet again, it's another discussion within the framework of numbers of discussions.
We've seen certain shifts take place in Zelenskyy's war cabinet. President Zelenskyy has moved his most trusted digital transformation minister, Mikhailo Fedorov, into the defense ministry during what is a wartime. Do you see this reshuffle as a strategic consolidation to strengthen Ukraine's defense, or could it risk somewhat slowing down critical decision-making at the time when every day counts?
I would say that given that Ukraine is a country that lives in a framework of a protracted war, it's almost 4 years as of today. Moreover, the, let's say, civilian government faced different scandals related to corruption, and quite huge corruption scandals. We remember the so-called Midas scandal and involving Medici who fled to Israel, for instance. And there is also necessity, and it, let's say, goes in line with the general logic that a country that lives within a protracted war needs to be more efficient with regard to military and security aspects. And this also explains the appointments, for example, appointment of Fedorov, who is seen, at least from what is generally known, who is seen as, who is rather associated with positive results in Ukraine, to the position of the Minister of Defense. And we remember also the scandals where the ministers of defense were involved previously. And also we can quote here the appointment of Chief of Military Intelligence, General Budanov, to the Chief of Staff of the Presidential Administration, which also translates, would most likely translate into more efficiency with regard to, on one side, the negotiations with the United States and potentially Russia, and also to the implementation of war-related policies.
Do you think that with all these meetings that are currently taking place, with the meetings that we're going to see, for example, the one in France on the 6th of January, there's a risk that Europe potentially is putting huge amounts of work with Ukraine to build this peace plan, to come up with certain solutions that could benefit both sides and fit both sides, which still can be derailed by Russia not wanting to sit down by the table?
First of all, I'm quite skeptical about the Russian willingness to really participate in the peace talks, even though they're doing this, but they're doing it mostly to avoid future and more efficient sanctions. Moreover, as of today, I don't see the need for Russia to actually accept any peace deal with Ukraine, because we've seen that the last year the Western support for Ukraine has pretty much depleted and was not at the same level as it used to be with the changes in the United States, with also the lower capabilities within the Western European countries to deliver Ukraine with necessary armaments and to initially replace the United States with this regard. It didn't really happen. And Russians, despite their economic problems, despite hardships, despite their also problems with the military organization, they still manage to mobilize people. They still manage to attract people to the army. They still manage to advance in the Ukrainian territory. So at this time, Russia doesn't necessarily need this peace, but it needs the negotiations to show that they are willing to end the war. But in my opinion, they are not.
With all these changes that we've seen, I mean, there is the counterintelligence agency, the SBU, and the replacement of high-profile ministers following that corruption scandal, which you mentioned before. How do you think that this is going to shift the impact both Ukraine's war effort and the negotiations for the peace deal are going? Do you think that Ukraine is going to emerge stronger, or perhaps we're going to see some slowing down when it comes to fighting and when it comes to getting the peace deal in place?
You know, it's a question that is difficult to answer because we don't have a crystal ball to see the future. But in my opinion, it is necessary for the Ukrainian government to show that they are willing to get rid of people involved into corruption, and the corruption is one of the, yet again, in my opinion, one of the factors that impacted the public opinion in our countries in the Western Europe regarding help to Ukraine, and it's something that was not really helping Ukraine to benefit from help from the Western Europe. I would say Western Europe or Western world, if you want. So it is necessary for Zelenskyy administration to put people who are not involved into corruption, because Budanov has no track of corruption whatsoever. Fedorov, neither. So those appointments are quite good, in my opinion, both for with regard to the communication with the Western governments, because Zelenskyy would be able to show that he has people who are not involved into corruption scandals, and he doesn't want to keep people who were involved in those scandals. And on the other hand, it should, at least in theory, to make the Ukrainian civilian administration more, I would say, capable to act quickly with regard and more efficiently with regard to the situation with the war-related situation, because we see that the Russian troops, albeit slowly, but continue to advance in the Zaporizhia region, in eastern Ukraine in general.
We are ahead of the 6th of January meeting, which is set to take place in France, as I mentioned before. From your perspective, what are your expectations regarding the meeting, especially after today, and how do you think that today's meeting will shape what we're about to see in Paris?
You know, in my opinion, yet again, maybe I'm repeating myself, but I see those meetings as yet another meetings within a chain of meetings that are necessary to come up with a real plan and the real deal that from one side we, the Europeans, will be able to propose to Ukraine, and the deal that will be also acceptable for our public opinion and civil society, and also the deal that would actually effectively guarantee the Ukrainian security in the future, to avoid, the so-called Budapest Memorandum-like ideas. On the other hand, whatever plan we may come up, most likely will be rejected by the Russians, because, as I'm repeating myself, but Russians, in my opinion, are not interested today in any peace deal whatsoever.
So if they're not interested, and you look at the meeting taking place today and the meeting set to take place on the 6th as a meeting within the meeting within the meeting, from your perspective, what is the solution? How do we get Russia to agree? We've heard from different experts and different officials about putting more sanctions. What is in your opinion, the ultimate solution to have the meeting of the meetings where Russia is actually going to sit down and talk to Ukraine and the US and to Europe?
The answer is quite easy, actually. For Russia to be ready to negotiate in a goodwill manner, it should be willing to negotiate. And in order to be willing to negotiate, it should see the necessity to negotiate. And to create this necessity, first of all, we have to be serious about our military, and I would yet again stress military help to Ukraine, so that the Ukrainians are able to defend their country from a military point of view. And also this coupled with the increased sanctions, and not only on Russia, but also on those countries and those companies and those entities who are helping Russia to avoid those sanctions. And only these actions coupled together may create an incentive for Russia to be serious about the negotiations. But yet again, it will take more time, maybe half a year, maybe 1 year more, maybe even 1 more and a half. And that's, by the way, one of the reasons, because, Ukraine recently received the green light from the European Union regarding the funding for the next 2 years, which means both the European Union capitals and Ukraine understand that most likely the war will be lasting at least 1 or 2 years more.
Mm-hmm. We're headed towards the end of the show, but just before we go, I wanted to ask you this final question. We've seen a massive event take place today. We've seen that Nicolas Maduro has been taken by the US and he's on his way to stand trial. We've seen an attack on Venezuela by the US. Do you think that the US attention is shifting to its very own backyard, and some attention is going to be taken away from the peace deal, from the Ukrainian peace deal, and from the Ukrainian war effort? What's your opinion?
First of all, I'd like to say that Ukraine has never been the priority for Trump administration. At least it's my reading of the situation. Moreover, from what I understood, Trump wants to have deals, and we've seen it in regard to Gaza-Israel war. We've seen it in other parts of the world, that he arrives and he wants to strike a deal and to put at least a freeze or a ceasefire in a conflict that is going on. It is not happening in Ukraine. It's not because of Ukraine, but because of Russia. And he understands that he doesn't have enough of leverage to make Russia sign a peace deal today. So it is also normal that his attention will be gradually shifting from Ukraine to other parts of the world, especially, I don't like this word, but the United States' backyard. We also may comment on the legal or international law involvement with this, with what we have observed this morning, but I guess it's not the question you asked me. So in brief, the United States most likely will be dealing with the urgent, let's say, priorities it sees, and with regard to its recently published national security strategy.
Thank you so much. Denis Kolesnyk, president of MENA Research Center, was my guest here on World Talks. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
And so this would be all for now. Thank you so much for joining me here on the program, and I hope to see you back here on TVP World for more news and features in just a moment.